Namaste. So, in the series of prayers and meditations, we take up this prayer of November 28th, 1912. This prayer teaches us the role of everyday activity, everyday life, whatever is happening in our outer circumstances, and how we can turn it into a yoga, constant yoga. The outer life, the activity of each day and each instant. Is it not the indispensable complement of our hours of meditation and contemplation? A lot of people are asking, they think that how to spend this time when they are all in the home. Of course, there are families who probably come together and speak to each other. There are also people who are watching television, computer, but there must be a better way of doing it. And there are countless people who don't have these kind of family support systems. So how should they spend their time? So one of them is that yes, we should spend time in meditation and contemplation, but naturally it is not enough. And is not the proportion of time given to each the exact image of the proportion which exists between the amount of effort to be made for the preparation and realization? So, on one side, there are activities of contemplation when we look within, when we remain in drawn, when we try to come in contact with the divine presence, the psychic being. This one kind of activity, one kind of thing which helps us toward the spiritual realization. But there are others. So, the mother reveals to us, for meditation, contemplation, union is the result obtained. If we go deep within ourselves, with a will to find the divine, we are bound to be taken there. We are bound to be drawn there. So people often wonder what kind of meditation should we do, what is the process, method. I think the most important thing, as we understand from Mother and Sri Aurobindo's writings, is the core aspiration. Do we really want the divine? And for what? Do we want the divine for the sake of the divine? Do we love the divine? Are we ready and willing to surrender ourselves completely to Him and to His will? And if we have this approach, this attitude, regardless of which way we concentrate, what method we follow, what is the deity, what is the name, we'll be drawn towards Him as a magnet draws the iron filings. The result of this meditation and contemplation is union. Union is the result obtained. We could even contemplate upon the divine nature. We can contemplate upon the divine presence in all things. We can contemplate the entire universe being held in the divine arms. There are countless ways we can contemplate, and focusing on that one idea, we go deeper and deeper into it. That idea becomes a help. So one of the best ideas which Sri Aurobindo gives us for contemplation is the divine is in all things are in the divine, and the divine is all. So this he said to one of the devotees, of course, not really a devotee, but a reader of the Arya. So this is something he said in 1917. So we must understand that later on Sri Aurobindo would speak about contemplating on the mother's presence within. But this is 1917, before the mother's final arrival, and before she took the charge of the yoga of not only of a few ashram inmates, but of the earth and mankind. So when Sri Aurobindo was asked, he said the best thing is to contemplate on the idea which is given in the Isha Upanishad, that the divine is in all things, that all things are the divine, and all things are in the divine. So this is one part, and the more we contemplate on this, the greater the union is obtained. The flower that blooms. So, union is the flower that blooms as a result of contemplation. But then there is another side. The daily activity is the anvil on which all the elements must pass and repass in order to be purified, refined, made supple and ripe for the illumination which contemplation gives to them. So, as a result of this contemplation, this union, we must allow it to spread in details on all the activities of our being, right from the morning time when we get up, when we go for brushing our teeth, when we take a bath, and when everything else we do, whatever we do. So we may not even go outside, but still there are number of activities every day in which we are engaged. Normally we do it routinely and mechanically, especially because we are rushing for some work or the other. Now, in many places, especially like in India, we have a complete lockdown, so people are not going out. So each of these activities can become very meaningful, very deep and profound. I just remember a few days back an experience which came spontaneously. Because of this lockdown, many people are having difficulty of receiving food. Though the government and the Honorable Prime Minister has said that there should be no problem with grocery and milk supply, but then there are a lot of poor people. They are also afraid that they are not getting enough money, and so they are going through a difficult period. And at the same time, on the other hand, myself, I had the means provided by the mother in various ways that I could afford to have meals in the morning without any problem. Morning, afternoon, night, I have been looked after. Many of us have been looked after. So when I was having my breakfast in the morning, normally I would just offer it and have my breakfast. But this time I had tears in my eyes because simultaneously two states came together. On the one side, I was very grateful that the Divine has provided us in such a way that we are looked after and we don't have to worry about these small aspects of life. That loaf of bread was so valuable. On the other hand, my heart was reaching out to countless people, millions of people who in this hour cannot afford. They have neither the means nor the money. Now I believe something is being provided, but that's a different story altogether, and I have no clue about all that, but I believe something is being provided. Still, for an average person who is missing out on his wages, who is losing on things, old people especially who just cannot go out, now it's very difficult for them in this hour. A lot of people give me a ring, they are under distress, they don't know how to spend their time alone, there's nobody to speak to them because they can't go out, their children can't come in because everywhere there is a fear. Now, because of this, they do not know how to really even arrange sometimes for a loaf of bread. So, how are they managing? So, there was a prayer that may everybody's hunger be appeased. So, simultaneously, on one side, a state of great gratitude, on the other hand. So, that morsel of food became so precious, so priceless, not just for myself, but for countless others. So, everyday activity which we do routinely and mechanically, be it a bath, be it food, be it just taking a walk within our small little place, maybe within the room. Sometimes even that I feel that people are missing out on exercises. Now, some of us are fortunate to have a garden or space to take a walk, but there are many who have very small rooms. So what do they do with their exercise? If they have to really stay inside, it's really going to be very difficult. There is not enough ventilation, not enough air and sunshine. So every little step that you take becomes so precious and it can be turned into a conscious yoga. All these, okay. So the flower that blooms, the daily activity is the anvil on which all the elements must pass and repass in order to be purified, refined, made supple and ripe for the illumination which contemplation gives to them. So each and everything must share this illumination, must share this state that we are, the state of peace, the state of beatitude which we discover within. So all these elements have to be refined. All these elements must be thus passed one after the other through the crucible before outer activity becomes needless for the integral development. Then is this activity turned into a means to manifest thee. So there are two purposes of outer activity. One is to make our nature more ready, make it more supple, make it more open to the light, make it plastic to the divine will, and the second, make us more selfless. And on the other hand, the outer activity, when the union is realized, when all these elements are purified and illuminated. Now here comes a little difference between Sri Aurobindo's yoga, the yoga of the Gita, vis-a-vis the typical Vedanta. According to Shankaracharya, the outer activity serves a purpose until the point when we realize the union, after which there is no need of any outer activity. But the Mother and Sri Aurobindo revealed to us that even after the union is realized, the outer activity becomes a means to manifest the divine. So it does not stop, only it changes its orientation and its purpose. Then is this activity turned into the means to manifest thee, so as to awaken the other centers of consciousness to the same dual work of the forge and the illumination. So it becomes a means to manifest, and thereby different parts in our nature which are not yet ready, which are getting prepared, they also share the illumination. She has used the word forge. So forge is, where material is being shaped, raw material is being shaped into something beautiful, artistic, like, in a goldsmith's place or an ironsmith's place. So it is the forge. Therefore, are pride and satisfaction with oneself the worst of all obstacles. So, when people feel that, I have had such a beautiful experience, and people get into comfort zones. These comfort zones are not just material, there are spiritual comfort zones. People are happy with a certain kind of experience, even certain realizations, or if they are able to do their meditation very well. She is reminding us that pride and self satisfaction are the worst of all obstacles. Because until nature is transformed, even if there is one element of darkness in nature, our work or the divine work is not complete. So, what we must do, very modestly, we must take advantage of all the minute opportunities offered to knead and purify some of the innumerable elements, to make them supple, to make them impersonal. So, to make these elements supple because of the challenges that we receive from life, and to make them impersonal, so that it's not only about ourselves, it about, even recently somebody was talking about India. I said, now this situation is such that we cannot just think about India, not even about humanity. It is about earth and about the sun, the light, the divine. So even to think of humanity is still limiting us and restricting us. Because who knows what is needed for the balance of the earth. So we have to look beyond ourselves to something much larger, much vaster, and spread out in a vast impersonality. To teach them forgetfulness of self. This is a time when we have to forget our own little comforts, our difficulties, our problems, our issues, and think about all life that is around us. And abnegation and devotion and kindness and gentleness. The real sense of our nobility comes out when we face the challenges. Mother speaks of the story of the charity bazaar. So normally we have this idea that civilization implies well-behaved, well-mannered, well-dressed, well-educated, literate gentleman. But the mother speaks about a story in Paris charity bazaar where everybody was, outwardly very well behaved, very well mannered, courteous, well dressed, and suddenly there was a fire. So, when there was a fire, everybody was rushing to save their own lives. And she speaks particularly about a gentleman, very well dressed. It's a image flashes in the mind with coat and tie and pant, and he was in a high position, and he was taking the stick and literally shooing away people who were coming on the way so that he could escape. So now there is an idea of nobility which we have from outside, and there is an inner nobility which comes out during moments of crisis when the real courage is tested. Now some break down very soon, but there are others who continue. So it's like any war. I mean, those who have been with the military, I have been, and we know that this is a test of our endurance, test of our faith, test of our courage, and how much ever long we are able to continue with an activity with perseverance and with patience without losing our calm and cool. And similarly, all these things should teach us kindness and gentleness. Can we remain kind and gentle even when we are in crisis? This is what is required. And when all these modes of being have become habitual to them, then are they ready to participate in the contemplation and to identify themselves with thee in the supreme concentration. So normally we notice people say this is a common problem, that we want to meditate, we are not able to meditate. Now the reason is because nature is not ready. Ultimately, the energy we have to withdraw from nature, all our consciousness, which is involved and attached in countless things, we have to withdraw from there. But these parts are not ready. It's like we have tied the boat to the shore and we are trying to row the boat. Now the boat will not go any further. It will keep on moving. Now if we have tied it with iron chains and locked it tightly, there is no way we may row the whole night, struggle, and yet, unless we open the chains, we cannot move further. So, something very similar happens that unless nature is prepared through nishkam karma, through a constant offering, we are not really ready to contemplate. And the more we are able to liberate these elements of nature from their bondage to outer things, from their bondage to ego self, from their bondage to selfishness, to rigid ideas, opinions, viewpoints, and only thinking about oneself. So when we are, unless we are able to liberate these elements from these and countless other bondages of ignorance, of inertia, or even of a illusion of a vital rajasic activity, or even the sense of self-righteousness, the sattvic consciousness, they are not ready to contemplate. So the daily activity is to liberate these different elements by making them supple, by making them plastic, by making them kinder, kindlier and gentler. Then it becomes easy to enter into contemplation. In India, we would say that make the consciousness more sattvic, which means think about others, about all the creatures, about countless beings, and then only we are ready to contemplate. As long as we are thinking only about ourselves and our small little comforts and joys and happiness and sorrow, we are not really ready for contemplation. And then we have to break even that sattvic bond. That comes later. That is why it seems to me that the work must be long and slow, even for the best. And that striking conversions cannot be integral. They change the orientation of the being, they put it definitely on the straight path, but truly to attain the goal, none can escape the need of innumerable experiences of every kind and every instant. So, in this yoga, especially, there is nothing like a sudden great illumination and experience or realization at which one rests, because nature has to constantly undergo purification, modification, opening to the divine. And where is the end of it? Even if our mind and thoughts and feelings, which are relatively easier to work upon, what about our passions? What about the will? What about the body? All this has to undergo constantly this process. O Supreme Master, who shinest in my being and each thing, let thy light be manifest and the rain of thy peace come for all. It's a beautiful prayer. And one more prayer I want to read. It's December 3rd, 1912. So this again is a beautiful prayer. When we are faced with challenges and difficulties, we feel helpless. Actually, when we feel most helpless, that is the time we can be strongest, not by the ego self feeling and believing that we are strong, but because that is the time we can really make the act of complete surrender. And I am reminded of the story of Markandeya, that when he was face to face with imminent death, what does he do? He surrenders himself at the feet of Lord Shiva and tells him that, look, here is death. And Shiva tells death, he manifests himself and said, you don't have a right over him. It is me who decides whether he will live or he will go. So that is one of the stories we know very well, and Markandeya is one of the immortals precisely because he made this great act of surrender. And this is the Indian way of dealing with different crises. So we, at this point, what I see, that in all these crises, we are only dealing it the Western way. Whatever they have found, that means that you strictly isolate, and all this is fine. This is one dimension because it's a purely material dimension of looking at an illness. Recently, somebody was telling me, and from very authentic sources, that this illness is not necessarily manifesting as respiratory symptoms. They have found that there are a number of people in which it is manifesting as a heart attack. Now people are getting scared because normally what was happening was they were especially focusing if people had symptoms of cough, cold to isolate them. But now there are people whom, and they were seeing people who had heart attacks. So one of the cardiologists mentions that we never imagined that they would be having the viral infection, COVID-19. Now, the reason is very simple. Spiritually, we can understand it, that it's not the virus, it's the vibration, it's the adverse attack. It can take any form. It is like in ancient days when we read some of these stories where, Ravana, he could take many forms. He could appear as a, Brahmin priest, and that's how he requested Sita Mata to step out. Or he could take the form of the 10-headed monster. Or he could take the form of, even Rama. There is a very interesting story about it, that when he was asked that, why don't you just take the form of Rama and get married to Sita. So, of course, Sita would easily recognize, because once he took the head of Lord Rama, which was obviously not correct, and he took to Sita saying that he is dead. And she recognized that this cannot happen and this is not true. So, because she was not bound to the form, she knew the consciousness of Rama. So, he says that even to think about Rama as my enemy creates changes within me of a different nature. If I assume Rama's form, I am sure I will no more be Ravana, but begin to change in the image of Rama. And I don't want that, because he had chosen a different path altogether. So even to contemplate on the divine form changes us from within. It doesn't matter, even if we imagine the mother and Sri Aurobindo. People often say, what is the point of, what is the need of imagining a form? Why not meditate on the divine in a formless way? Well, we can do that. Nobody can stop us. But when we imagine a form and we know that form as the divine, we identify in our consciousness with that form as the divine, it makes it so much more concrete, so much more easier to contemplate. And we begin to assume those aspects in our nature which are there manifested and represented and expressed in that form. So by contemplating on the form, we begin to realize the essence, the divine essence in that form. So now in this prayer, she speaks about the surrender. Last night, I had the experience of the effectivity of confident surrender to thy guidance. When it is needful that something should be known, one knows it. And the more passive the mind to the illumination, the clearer and the more adequate is its expression. So what we need is to have this trust that if we need to know something, we will know it, and completely we should confidently surrender to the divine guidance, making the mind like a passive mirror to the illuminating light. I listened to thee as thou spokest in me. And I would have liked to write down what thou saidst, so that the formula in all its precision might not be lost. For now I should not be able to repeat what was said. So now this is very interesting. See, this is how religions are formed. When somebody receives an illumination and formulates in words and tells this is the way. Now the mother has discovered, no, that should not be done. Because if we do it, we fix a truth. Truth is many-sided, complex, plastic, supple, infinite. At the same time, it is one and extremely simple. To each one, it reveals itself differently. So, she realizes that no, there is no need to write this conversation that she had. Then I thought that this care for conservation was again an insulting lack of confidence towards thee. Means that divine has spoken once, now he won't speak again. So I must write it down and make it a firm edict. Later on it'll turn into a rigid dogma. That is how religions are formed. For thou canst make of me all that I need to be, and in the measure in which my attitude allows thee to act on me and in me. Thy omnipotence has no limits. At one place, Mother says, it is our faith that limits us, but not the grace. The grace is infinite and can achieve everything, can reveal everything, can do everything, provided we keep the doors of faith open. To know that at each instant what must be surely is, as perfectly as is possible for all those who know how to see thee in everything and everywhere. So we come back to the same truth to see the divine in all things and everywhere. And if we live with that state, then at each instant the divine will reveal himself according to what is necessary at that given moment. There are no fixed rules or rigid ideas or dogmas. No more fear. Naturally, with that, fear vanishes, apprehension vanishes, anxieties vanish because we are constantly worried about what's going to happen in the future. And we are looking to newspapers, to the news analysis. Have we not several times seen that all these analyses are proved wrong? There are psephologists to predict the results of elections. There are people who are now predicting the result of this epidemic and all this. All these will act if we have faith in these predictions. But instead, if we trust that everything will be fine, that the divine grace is with us and nothing will happen. Now, this does not mean throwing care and caution to the winds. It doesn't mean that. It means in all circumstances, in whatever situation we are, to live with trust and faith in our hearts. Whatever we put our faith into, that begins to become active. The law of that plane begins to become active in our life. So if we put our faith into the deadliness of the virus and it's attacking us from here, there, everywhere, then it will become powerful and potent because we have invested our faith. But if on the contrary we have faith that the divine grace is there everywhere, and even if the virus was in every particle, the divine grace, much more powerful, is there in every particle and can annihilate it at every moment, then the grace will act. No more fear, no more uneasiness, no more anguish. Nothing but a perfect serenity, an absolute confidence, a supreme, unwavering peace.